Good morning. The committee meets today to consider the nominations of Ms. Melissa G. Dalton to be Undersecretary of the Air Force, Dr. Douglas C. Schmidt to be Director of Operational Tests and Evaluation, and Dr. April J. Ericson to be Assistant Secretary of Defense for Science and Technology. I thank the nominees for their careers of service to the United States and their willingness to assume these important roles. I would also like to welcome the guests and family members who are with us today. Ms. Dalton, I welcome your husband, Jason. Dr. Schmidt, I welcome your partner, Karen. Dr. Ericson, I welcome your partner, Aaron, your daughter, Ariel, and other family members, your mother particularly, who are here today. Ms. Dalton, you have been nominated to serve as the Undersecretary of the Air Force. Your decades of experience in defense policy, including your current role as Assistant Secretary of Defense for Homeland Defense and Hemispheric Affairs, and prior role performing the duties of the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Strategy, Plans, and Capabilities, will serve you well in this position. If you are confirmed, you will face a number of pressing challenges for the Air Force. The service has operated at a high tempo for the past 2 decades, supporting around-the-clock operations in the Middle East and around the world. This high operating tempo has challenged Air Force leaders to adequately invest in modernization efforts. With China posing new, unprecedented challenges to our air power in the Indo-Pacific and emerging technologies like hypersonic weapons and unmanned aerial vehicles creating new threats around the world, the Air Force must adapt quickly to stay ahead. In particular, the Air Force must continue to strengthen and improve its acquisition system in order to field new capabilities to match the speed of technological change. The next Undersecretary will need to take steps to ensure that the Air Force has a secure and reliable industrial base and a trained and qualified workforce. I would like to know your plans for addressing these challenges for the Air Force. Dr. Schmidt, you are nominated to be the Director of Operational Test and Evaluation, or DOT&E. This position is responsible for all operational and live-fire review, testing, and evaluation activities. You bring a wealth of experience in military technology development, having held key leadership roles at DARPA, Vanderbilt University, Carnegie Mellon, and other government and industry organizations. There are a number of challenges that will require your attention within the department. In particular, you will be responsible for updating the department's aging test infrastructure and capabilities to prevent falling behind our competitors. Key to this effort will be addressing gaps in the size and expertise of the DOT&E workforce, particularly in areas such as software development, cybersecurity, and data analysis, as well as integrating new tools such as artificial intelligence and machine learning to help the test enterprise do their jobs much better. You will also be tasked with improving the data available within the testing community, including access to data rights and intellectual property, which are critical to more effectively test and evaluate weapon systems, including cyber vulnerabilities. I look forward to hearing how you will address these challenges. Finally, Dr. Ericson, you have been nominated to be the first Assistant Secretary of Defense for Science and Technology, or ASD-S&T. This position was established in the fiscal year 23 National Defense Authorization Act and will report to the Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering. As the first nominee for this position, you will be responsible for establishing the office and codifying its roles and responsibilities. The ASD-S&T will have purview over DoD basic research, DoD labs, small business innovation research programs, and the development of emerging technologies, including advanced materials, biotechnology, 5G, quantum science, and hypersonics. Dr. Ericson, you are eminently qualified for this position, having served in top technology leadership positions at NASA for more than 30 years. Including your current role as new business lead, Instrument Systems and Technology Division at the Goddard Space Flight Center. You will have a pivotal role in shaping the office and the powers of the ASD-S&T. I would like to know your vision for the position, including how you plan to advance the goal of delivering war-winning capabilities to our nation's warfighters, as well as maintaining and growing the department's STEM workforce. Thank you again to all of our nominees. I look forward to your testimonies. Let me now recognize the ranking member, Senator Wicker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today we're here to consider 3 nominees for important roles in the Department of Defense. I welcome the nominees and their families, as the chair did. The Air Force and Space Force both possess insufficient capacity and capability to meet their growing mission sets. This is the case even as we march toward a state of maximum vulnerability in the Pacific. The last confirmed appointee to the post that Ms. Dalton has been selected for failed to focus on this challenge. He created division in our military instead of prioritizing readiness and modernization. If Ms. Dalton is confirmed, I hope she will not do the same. Regrettably, her performance in her position gives me pause. While she has been at the post, the Department of Defense was caught flat-footed as a Chinese surveillance balloon traversed the continental United States and flew over military sites. When Congress sought more information, she, along with others in the department, evaded constitutionally authorized oversight. Nearly a year later, we're still learning new facts about that episode. I'm also concerned about Ms. Dalton's handling of the Pentagon's responsibilities at our southwestern border. At one point, the Department of Defense was spending $130,000 every day to store instead of use border wall construction materials. They had already been manufactured, they were ready, and yet we were spending $130,000 every day to store them. Meanwhile, illegal immigration broke records. Later, we found out that the Department of Defense had initiated a process in which these panels would be auctioned for pennies on the dollar, a clear effort to circumvent emerging congressional intent. As the Finish It Act was being added to the NDAA. That act was added to the NDAA, is now the law of the land. Ms. Dalton also failed to deliver the Homeland Defense planning guidance until the end of 2023, over a year after the release of the National Defense Strategy. This track record casts a shadow on this nomination. But on top of it all, she has virtually no experience with the Air Force. Ms. Dalton needs to address what she will bring to this position and what she has learned from the mistakes in the current and prior roles. Now, briefly, Mr. Chairman, if confirmed, Dr. Ericson would help keep the U.S. military technology a step ahead of our adversaries. The Pentagon relies on American universities for early stage research and development, but today it works primarily with major universities in just a few states. I hope Dr. Ericson will advocate for the Department of Defense taking advantage of the talent, capabilities, and expertise found at research institutions from coast to coast, not just a select few. And then with regard to Dr. Schmidt, if confirmed, he will have his work cut out for him. This role has grown and is now responsible for the certification of all middle-tier acquisition programs. These programs increase the speed at which the U.S. prototypes and fields new systems. And they use novel testing methods for certain software acquisition pathway programs. These are exciting developments, but new systems often require new processes. The testing community could find it challenging to support the iterative testing these systems require, particularly where the lines between development and fielding are blurred. So I look forward to hearing how Dr. Schmidt will promote best practices and support rapid acquisition pathways in this ever-changing area. So thank you all for being here, and I look forward to your testimony.
Well, thank you very much, Senator Wicker. Now I would call upon Dr. Schmidt for his opening statement. You can.
Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Wicker, and esteemed members of the committee. I'm honored that President Biden nominated me as the Director of Operational Test and Evaluation. I'd like to express my gratitude to the President, Secretary Austin, and Deputy Secretary Hicks for their consideration. I'd also like to acknowledge my family, including my parents, retired Navy Captain Raymond Schmidt and Roberta Schmidt, my partner, Karen Perry, and my son, Bronson Schmidt, for their unwavering support. My relationship to national security spans my entire life. My parents met after my father received his commission in the United States Navy and was stationed at the National Security Agency, where my mother and her father worked. My professional involvement with national security spans 4 decades, marked by extensive work in researching, developing, and testing United States military systems. I've evaluated software product lines for mission computing systems in military aircraft, assessing the reliability of avionics and cockpit functions. I've led national efforts at the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, developing, validating, and verifying technologies applied in mission-critical systems, including naval shipboard computing environments and Air Force time-critical targeting systems. I've overseen cybersecurity and software testing initiatives at the Software Engineering Institute, working closely with the Air Force as a member of their scientific advisory board on a variety of topics, including assessing Air Force cyber situational awareness readiness, as well as aircraft sustainment and testing efforts. I've also performed independent technical assessments for the United States Missile Defense Agency, Sentinel Program, and Long Range Standoff Program. And most recently, I've led research and development efforts focused on responsible and reliable application of generative augmented intelligence in defense acquisition systems. If confirmed to this critical role, my foremost commitment would be to accurately assess the effectiveness, suitability, survivability, and, when necessary, the lethality of defense systems created for our dedicated warfighters. This commitment underpins the United States' vital role of deterring conflicts and ensuring national security. As we navigate the evolving landscape of warfare marked by advancing capabilities, both our own as well as our adversaries, our capacity for operational test and evaluation must evolve in tandem. Integrating operational test and evaluation throughout the development lifecycle of our acquisition programs is paramount. This approach allows us to assess our weapon systems under realistic combat conditions, optimize the use of taxpayer resources, and implement cost-effective enhancements to achieve peak performance. Transparent reporting of test outcomes is critical for our nation, since it fosters a culture of continual improvement that reaffirms our armed services as the world's preeminent fighting force. If confirmed, I commit to ensuring the Office of Operational Test and Evaluation delivers independent, accurate, and authoritative assessment of defense system performance, both for your benefit and for Secretary Austin. Adapting our operational test and evaluation strategies for future warfare necessitates both incremental improvements and groundbreaking innovations built on collaboration among a diverse set of stakeholders. This transformation requires a reliance on a highly skilled test and evaluation workforce, as well as cutting-edge infrastructure, methods, and tools. Together, these assets will enable faster and more efficient assessment of defense systems under realistic operating conditions. But to achieve this objective, we need to integrate various digital technologies, such as high-fidelity modeling and simulation tools, as well as testing conducted on live-fire ranges and in laboratory settings. This integration will instill confidence in our warfighters, provide operators with valuable insights into system usability, assist in verifying, validating, and accrediting digital models, and identifying vulnerabilities beyond the limits of today's technologies and modeling simulation tools. If confirmed, I'm committed to fostering robust collaborations with our research and engineering community, acquisition programs, armed services, and international partners. Together, we'll strengthen the department's capacity to provide robust warfighting capabilities to the joint force while ensuring effective oversight, transparency, and value for taxpayers. I'm eager to fulfill my responsibilities by collaborating closely with key stakeholders, including Congress, the department, the services, and industry partners. It would be my privilege to contribute to this vital mission as the Director of Operational Test and Evaluation. Thank you, and I look forward to your question.
Thank you very much, Dr. Schmidt. Secretary Dalton, please.
Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Wicker, and distinguished members of the committee, it is an honor to come before you today and be considered as President Biden's nominee for Undersecretary of the Air Force. I want to thank President Biden for my nomination, as well as Secretary Austin, Deputy Secretary Hicks, and Secretary Kendall for their confidence in me. I also wish to thank my family, friends, and mentors for their encouragement, particularly my husband and true north, Jason, my two amazing children, Jacob and Isabel, and my parents, Ann and Ravi. My father chose to make this country his own as an immigrant from India. He and my mother imbued within me a deep respect for the foundational values of our great nation. I come from a family committed to public service and have been drawn to it since I was 22 years old. I am honored by the prospect of serving as the Undersecretary of the Air Force. I began my career at the Department of Defense as a civil servant during the Bush administration and served for a decade in several policy and intelligence roles. I then spent 6 years at the bipartisan think tank, the Center for Strategic and International Studies. I was honored to return to DoD on January 20th, 2021, as Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Strategy, Plans, and Capabilities as a member of the Biden-Harris administration. Since March 2022, and with the Senate's confirmation, I have served as the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Homeland Defense and Hemispheric Affairs. Distinguished members of the committee, the People's Republic of China, DoD's pacing challenge, is the United States' most consequential strategic competitor and the most pressing challenge facing the Department of the Air Force. As part of the team that developed the 2022 National Defense Strategy and Missile Defense Review, and as the co-lead in developing the Nuclear Posture Review, I understand the challenge that PRC presents and the role that the Air Force and Space Force have in meeting that challenge. Under Secretary Kendall's leadership, substantial work is already underway to modernize the Air Force and Space Force. Secretary Kendall has called for re-optimizing for great power competition, and if confirmed, I would look forward to helping him achieve that vision. I have a track record of effectively driving NDS-aligned priorities forward in DoD. I led the development of the first update to DoD's classified Homeland Defense Policy Guidance in a decade, signed by Secretary Austin, focused on the PRC pacing challenge. A second challenge facing the Department of the Air Force is nuclear modernization, following decades of focus on other priorities. If confirmed, I would leverage my experience co-leading the NPR to ensure the Department of the Air Force is making the necessary investments to maintain a safe, secure, and effective nuclear deterrent. Given the nuclear threat landscape, it is vital for the United States to invest in modernizing the nuclear triad as the bedrock of our national defense and for our extended deterrence commitments to our allies. If confirmed, I would steward two legs of the nuclear triad. Finally, and most importantly, the Department of the Air Force faces challenges to recruitment and retention of talent in the Air Force while also harnessing the opportunity of growing the Space Force. If confirmed, I would prioritize these issues. We can build exquisite capability, but without taking care of service members and their families, we will not succeed in achieving our aims. As the DoD Agency Coordination Lead for Anomalous Health Incidents, I have worked across OSD and the military departments to better synchronize medical care for affected DoD personnel and research into the types of technologies that could cause adverse physiological effects. If confirmed, I would bring the same focus and dedication to enhancing recruitment and improving quality of life and service for our airmen and guardians. We have a fundamental responsibility to provide the best support for our service members and their families to honor their service and sacrifice. I would like to conclude by saying that I have a deep appreciation for this committee and its role. In my current position, I am proud to have briefed and testified before Congress over 24 times. If confirmed, I commit to consulting with you regularly and providing timely and accurate information to advance our nation's priorities in an active, bipartisan, transparent, and cooperative manner. I have long viewed Congress as a partner, and I will continue to do so in my current position and if confirmed as Undersecretary of the Air Force. Thank you for your consideration. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Secretary Dalton. Dr. Ericson, please.
Good morning, Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Wicker, and distinguished members of the committee. Thank you for your consideration of my nomination as the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Science and Technology. I am deeply honored by the trust and confidence placed in me by President Biden, Secretary Austin, and Undersecretary Shue. I want to express my gratitude to my family, several who've traveled here today, including my mother, Corinne Ericson, my siblings, Trina and Dawn, and my daughter, Ariel. I also want to acknowledge my trusted mentors, former NASA Administrator Major General Charlie Bolden, current NASA Goddard Space Flight Center Deputy Director, Second Lieutenant Cynthia Simmons, and former Assistant Secretary of the Navy, Executive Officer Buddy Joe Penn. Your support has been invaluable. My journey traces back to my grandparents, who migrated from Barbados, Montserrat, and St. Croix. I inherit their passion for learning and tenacity for action. I spring from a family of educators, engineers, craftsmen, civil servants, and service members of the U.S. Navy and Army. I was raised in New York and Cambridge, cities enriched with varied people, places, and ideas. An early school experience launched my journey to this moment. In first grade, I watched two American heroes walk on the moon. Filled with dreams of exploring and studying the universe, I was inspired to pursue aerospace engineering and attended MIT. While at Howard University, my MIT advisor, Dr. Sheila Whitnall, invited me to attend her confirmation hearings for the Secretary of the Air Force. Further inspired, I focused on co-oping at NASA Goddard Space Flight Center. My interest in aerospace and astronaut training took flight. It fueled and propelled me to earn a master's and PhD in mechanical engineering. I was initially unaware when nominated by the President that if I confirmed to the position, I would be the first Assistant Secretary of Defense for Science and Technology. I humbly assert that setting precedents is comfortable territory for me. Today, I feel grounded by my educational foundation, my robust experiences. My CV includes being a STEM educator, board leader in academia and science, a technical management leader at NASA for more than 30 years. In my roles as engineer, scientist, technologist, program manager, new business lead, policymaker, and ambassador, I have remained mindful that as we innovate, design, and build, we must develop impactful, cost-effective, and reliable solutions for the knowledge and the security of the entire world. In my work, I have contributed to groundbreaking discoveries like the Big Bang Theory, black holes, gravitational waves, and modeling and monitoring climate change and the sun's radiation, and finally, the moon and Mars exploration. These scientific contributions, along with my ongoing work in infusing, advancing manufacturing, incorporating innovative sensor and detector technologies for missions like the James Webb Space Telescope, accelerating the use of CubeSats as aerospace vehicles, and growing quantum capabilities closely align with the Department of Defense's critical science and technology areas. If confirmed, I would pursue my vision to share the technical success stories of DoD's essential workforce and their STEM ecosystem partners. This would profoundly impact our service members' morale, grow public confidence, encourage small businesses, and inspire a recruit stream. I would also focus on broad STEM outreach across the globe to inspire, hire, train, and retain the next generation of engineers and scientists. This is essential for the growth of our entire military workforce. I am eager to leverage my in-depth experience of supporting small businesses to deliver combative technology to the department. My vision for CyberSitter would provide opportunities for small business innovators to bridge the valley of death and deliver the rewards of our government's investments, all while securing our innovative technology. In this complex and rapidly evolving security environment, my vision aims to boost our technical advantages by shepherding our critical and emerging technologies and strengthening our industrial manufacturing base and protect our intellectual property. If confirmed, I will ensure the work of my portfolio is always aligned with the National Defense Strategy, and I will prioritize vital disruptive technologies like hypersonic weapons, artificial intelligence, and quantum computing. Reflecting on my time at NASA, I am grateful for the honor and privilege of doing what I love. The new opportunity would allow me to continue my government service. Today, I humbly step forward, committed to pivoting my diplomatic talents, academic networks, technical knowledge, and experience to grow our workforce in the service of the Department of Defense. I'm equipped to identify technology gaps, safeguard our innovative technology, balance risk, and rapidly transition novel systems to our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Guardians. I greatly respect the committee's bipartisan approach. I commit to sustaining regular and transparent dialogue with Congress, for we share the same goal: deterring our adversaries and maintaining the nation's security. Thank you for this opportunity, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Erickson. I have a series of standard questions for civilian nominees. You may respond in unison. Have you adhered to applicable laws and regulations governing conflicts of interest?
Yes.
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 Have you assumed any duties or taken any actions that would appear to presume the outcome of the confirmation process?
No.
No.
Exercising our legislative and oversight responsibilities makes it important that this committee, its subcommittees, and other appropriate committees of Congress receive testimony, briefings, reports, records, and other information from the executive branch on a timely basis. Do you agree, if confirmed, to appear and testify before this committee when requested?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you agree to provide records, documents, and electronic communications in a timely manner when requested by this committee, its subcommittees, or other appropriate committees of Congress, and to consult with the requester regarding the basis for any good faith delay or denial in providing such records?
Yes.
Yes.
Will you ensure that your staff complies with deadlines established by this committee for the production of reports, records, and other information, including timely responding to hearing questions for the record?
Yes.
Yes.
Will you cooperate in providing witnesses and brief us in response to congressional requests?
Yes.
Yes.
Will those witnesses and briefers be protected from reprisal for their testimony or briefings?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Secretary Dalton, did you play any role in what happened with the border wall material?
No, Senator, I did not.
Now, well, who made those decisions?
Senator, on day one of the Biden administration, the president issued an executive order to halt the construction of the border barrier wall. The decision then on what to do with the materials fell to the Defense Logistics Agency after it declared those materials as excess property.
Are you aware why they made the decisions they did to that process?
Chairman, my understanding is that DLA followed the law required by the federal property management regulations. The material was first offered to 4 different entities per the DLA process for it to be then declared as excess, first to DOD, then to other federal departments and agencies, then to state and local government agencies and nonprofit organizations, and finally, as a last chance opportunity for the entities previously described to claim the materials. At each stage of that process, all declined to take the materials, including the state of Texas.
So you in no way decided the price of any of these materials at any time?
No, Senator, that does not fall in my portfolio.
You respond to a letter written by Republican colleagues, why did you do so, since it appears you had no real responsibilities for the disposal of the material?
Chairman, because there was a congressional inquiry addressed to me on the actions that took place, and because I take the oversight role of Congress incredibly seriously as a Senate-confirmed official, I felt members of this committee who wrote the letter deserved a thorough response. And so I asked my team and undertook a fact-finding mission across the department, working with other components that do have oversight over these processes and materials, and have the decision-making responsibilities in this matter to get answers to the questions that had been posed to me in the letter. I collected that information, the best available that we had at the time, and used that to provide a response to the letter.
Thank you. Dr. Schmidt, AI is rapidly encroaching upon everything we do. And how will you try to integrate AI in our testing, particularly the JAS-C2 system, which is, we hope, the critical interface between all of our services? You can bring that closer, too.
Chairman Reed, I've worked extensively with artificial intelligence over many years, and it's a very promising and also a very challenging technology. With respect to systems that are emerging for kill webs, sixth-generation predator airplane programs, the JADC2 environment, it's crucially important that those systems be able to use advanced, quote, intelligent techniques, smart techniques, autonomous techniques. We're already doing quite a bit with artificial intelligence in a lot of our systems for computer vision, but being able to test those systems is going to involve many challenges. If I'm confirmed in this position, I will continue to work with other parties at the DoD, such as the Chief Data and Information Office and the CIO's office, to ensure that we're able to use artificial intelligence in a responsible but effective way. And this includes being able to provide training and expertise for the DOT&E staff, as well as ensuring that the systems we put into field that use AI do so in a way that won't cause more harm than good.
Thank you, Doctor. Dr. Ericson, one of the key challenges you've already mentioned is increasing the STEM workforce and improving their skills and retaining that talent, because one of the things we find is that when someone works successfully, that they're being offered quite astounding pays outside. So could you give us an idea of what you would intend to do?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. I'm very passionate about our future STEM workforce. They are our most valuable asset for the cultivation and the current recruitment of the next generation. I say we should inspire, hire, train, and retain. Not only should we be concerned about who's entering the workforce and maintaining them, but we also want to make sure that we retain them. I say let's cast a wide net. First of all, 50% of our population are women, so it's very important to be inclusive and including women in those careers. We often focus on HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, provide us with 25% of the African Americans in the STEM disciplines. So therefore, it's really important to tap into those sources as well. Personally, what my interns from this summer, I had 17 different interns from all over this country, many of them from the states that you represent. It is very important for us to consider these diverse thoughts because we have unique experiences from the environments we are groomed in. And it will ultimately be very important, to have them in our workforce so we can deliver the best technology for our troops.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ericson. Senator Wicker, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Dalton, you answered a standard question that the chair asks every nominee about timely responses to questions for the record and also other inquiries. I have a letter from you here dated August 1st, thanking me for my letter of March 15. So I wrote you in consultation with other members of the committee and staff on March 15th. So it's April, May, June, July, and half of July then, that long to get me a letter dated August 1st. You consider that a timely response?
Ranking Member Wicker, I take my responsibilities as Senate-confirmed official very seriously, and that includes providing you and other members of Congress with a timely response. For the letter in question, as I described to the chairman—
Well, okay, if you will, you don't have to repeat what you said, because I have a very little time. Let me just say I don't consider that a timely response. And also, it was an inaccurate response. It says in paragraph 3, a decision on the disposition of the remaining materials will be made in accordance with applicable law and policy. We considered that such an unsatisfactory answer that the entire Republican membership of this committee sent a letter directly to the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, and we didn't wait forever to get that letter done either. Later on that month, we sent the letter. And in response to that, we find out that on August 1st, when you wrote the letter and said a decision will be made, the decision had actually been made. And title to the property was transferred to Iron Planet, which is a broker that sells off excess property, by the end of April 2023. Now we wrote you on March 15, and some month and a half later, when perhaps this decision could have been stopped, somewhere in the department, the decision was made to transfer these already built portions of the wall to a third party to auction off at pennies on the dollar. Do you concede that the statement you made in your letter about a decision going to be made, will be made, was inaccurate?
Senator, the August letter was based on the information collected from other components across the Department of Defense, and it was the best available information that we had at the time.
Who gave you incorrect information? I'd like to know.
It was drawn from several components across the department to include the Defense Logistics Agency, the Department of the Army, Acquisition and Sustainment. There are a number of components that have roles to play in this matter, Senator.
Well, you know, this is actually emblematic of the way this committee, minority or majority, has been treated, and members of the House and Senate have been treated during this administration. A lengthy time to answer a question, and of course the chair's standard questions say timely, but that many months to answer this, to tell us that a decision is still going to be made. We find out that a month and a half after we brought this to your attention, they had time enough to then make a decision to sell these valuable portions of the border wall for pennies on the dollar. To me, it's unsatisfactory, and it's just like the way your department and your office did with regard to the Chinese spy balloon. You said you take your oversight responsibilities seriously, and after our letter, you entered into this long fact-finding process. It doesn't appear that you did that with regard to all of the questions regarding NORAD's lack of established identification, characterization, and handoff procedures. And so my time has expired here, but I just find your performance in your previous role so unsatisfactory that I have real doubts that it's going to get any better in an enhanced role. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Wicker. Senator Shaheen, please.
Good morning to all of our nominees. Congratulations on your nominations, and thank you for your willingness to continue to serve this country. Dr. Schmidt, Pease National Guard Base in New Hampshire, the 157th Air Refueling Wing, was the first National Guard base to get the KC-46 refueling tanker. That was in 2019. We received our first plane. We are still waiting for the new remote vision system to work in that tanker. As I understand, you will be the person who will continue to follow whether that remote vision system gets completed properly. Do you commit to staying on top of that and keeping this committee and me informed about what the progress is?
Yes, Senator, absolutely.
Thank you. Dr. Ericson, in New Hampshire, we have a regenerative center called Regen Valley in Manchester that's working on regenerative medicine and has gotten significant contributions from the Department of Defense. We also have at BAE a new microelectronics center that was designated as a semiconductor manufacturing facility by the Chips and Science Act. They received a significant grant. Can you talk about how you envision leveraging these kinds of tech hubs and the Chips and Science grant recipients to ensure that our investments in semiconductor manufacturing are done well and that we use the innovation that's happening there in a way that benefits our security?
Sure, Senator. Thank you for those questions. I just wanted to mention that it's because of the Peace Air Force Base that I actually ended up in aerospace engineering during a visit as a high school student.
Great.
So the CHIPS Act is, I must say thank you to the committee for invoking the CHIPS Act. It's understanding $52 billion is a critical investment and a critical enabler for us to be able to actually produce microchips in our United States regions. It's, from my understanding, we're investing something like $400 million over 5 years because we do recognize it will take time to build a lab-to-fab regional facilities. Microchip electronics are in everything that we utilize. And we saw during the pandemic that it was particularly impactful because we were not able to provide those resources from outside of our borders. And it was almost crippling to our economy. So, of course, I will commit to making sure that these things continue to grow. You mentioned one that I was not aware of in your state, but I look forward to working with that biotech partner and growing those capabilities, which are very important and critical to delivering to our warfighters.
Well, thank you. Secretary Dalton, I mentioned that the P's 157th Air Refueling Wing received the first KC-46. Part of the reason that happened was because of the Air Force's active association structure, which allows our National Guard members to work with active duty. During the pandemic, we lost virtually that entire active duty component. Fortunately, those folks are back, but can you speak to why that structure is critical and why it will be important to preserve that as we look going forward?
Senator Shaheen, thank you for the question. In my current role, I know how valuable the National Guard is for our national defense and how it can support a range of missions for the Department of Defense, working in lockstep oftentimes with our active duty forces. I've seen that even at the southwest border over the last year. With regards to the specific case you mentioned, while I'm not familiar with the particulars in my current status, if confirmed, I would certainly look forward to leveraging the attributes of both the National Guard and the active duty, how we can bring them together for total force integration to ensure we're leveraging the comparative advantages across the force as we move forward on modernization.
Well, I hope we will continue where those that collaboration is working well, as it is in the 157th, that we will continue that force structure in a way that allows those units to continue to operate. And I hope that you will look at that very closely and ensure that that happens. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, Senator Shaheen. Senator Rounds, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first of all, thank you, all of you, for your service to our country. I'd like to begin just, Dr. Schmidt, what do you think the biggest challenges are that we face with regard to the ability to test and to analyze just exactly where our systems are at today? What's the shortcomings that we have to address?
Senator, some of the key challenges, as I'm sure you're aware, are in cybersecurity. Our adversaries have very sophisticated capabilities offensively. Our systems are getting more complicated, and they're only as strong as the weakest link. So making sure that we have the appropriate capabilities and workforce and tools to conduct advanced red team assessments is crucially important. There's also a big challenge in terms of these new generation ConOps, concept of operations, such as kill webs and JADC2, which involve coordination between many different sensors and shooters, where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Very important we have that capability as you can imagine, very difficult to test. So we have to make sure, once again, we have the right people with the right skills and the right test equipment in order to be able to ensure those systems work as designed.
We're not there right now, are we?
It's a continual process, and if confirmed, I commit to working very hard to making sure we get the right assets to address those challenging issues.
An ongoing process.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Dr. Ericson, right now there is sometimes they would suggest a valley of death with regard to the ability of small firms to be able to step up into the high technology areas and get past those first couple of months to years before their products are actually coming to market or being made available. Can you talk a little bit about our needs here with regard to those startup companies and what we could perhaps do to allow more of them to be successful in bringing their products to market?
Senator Rounds, thank you for allowing me to talk about something that I've been working on at NASA Goddard Space Flight Center for some years and across the agency as well. There are really three components to the Valley of Death that I want to expand upon. There are more than one. There's partnerships and opportunities to work strategically to support our partners. And then we must have patience. Technology does take a while to develop. When I mentioned there were more than one, there are the early phases. If we don't identify those requirements early and bring in the potential long-term partners, we end up struggling to make sure that we get what we want when we enter those later phases in our development, or what we call technology readiness levels. There is also this aspect of test as we fly, as we say, and here we say test as we fight. Because you really do want to test this new innovative technology in the environment that you envision for it later. So not kind of having those oh, wait a minute, we didn't do this exactly right, and then having to take some steps back. That, of course, needs resources and money. And then there's this step when you're potentially commercializing or mass producing. Often small businesses don't have that capability, and we ultimately need to get thousands of them to our troops. So it's really going to be important to help to educate and to counsel small businesses along the way. I think that's one of the most important aspects. And then on our side of the business, where we really look at the cycles of funding, sometimes small businesses get to that milestone, and then the funding is not there because of either our phasing in our congressional awards or other things that kind of hold us back. So if we are able to look at some of those things, we'll be able to help them to ultimately deliver what we need for our...
We look forward to working with you to get that done. Secretary Dalton, your nomination to be the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Homeland Defense passed the Senate Armed Services Committee by a voice vote. You were not controversial. Since that time, two items have happened that now call into question that confidence. The ranking member has identified very clearly the concerns with regard to the way that you responded to the issue of material at the southern border, how it was handled, the assurances that were made that this was going to be handled in accordance to law, and yet it had already been completed. It was not forthright to the committee. It really challenged the confidence that many of us had expressed in supporting your nomination to begin with. You have some work to do to regain that confidence. Let me ask about another item, and that is with regard to the Chinese spy balloon, which entered our airspace through Alaska, coming across Canada, back into the United States again. This was under your watch. Were you in the direct chain of command with regard to the decisions that were made not to shoot the balloon down until after it had left American airspace?
Senator, I was one of the officials advising Secretary Austin. The best military advice to not shoot down the balloon over U.S. territory came from our U.S. Senior military officials.
Okay, look, this is an area which you will be challenged on this particular one because it's a question of judgment and recommendations being made. I think between now and the time that a vote is held on your nomination, I think you've got some work to do to regain the confidence of a lot of the members on this committee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Rounds. Senator Blumenthal, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for your service and your willingness to continue to serve. Ms. Dalton, I've read reports that Ukrainian pilots are now flying F-16s with instructors. The Ukrainian Air Force spokesman, Yuri Inat, apparently told Ukrainian TV broadcasters that Ukrainian pilots are now flying with those instructors. Could you please indicate how many Ukrainian pilots are flying and when they would be ready to actually fly F-16s in combat in defense of Ukraine?
Senator, thank you for the question. And the United States and specifically the Department of Defense is committed to supporting Ukraine in its fight against Russia and its reinvasion of Ukraine. On the specific question that you raise, I don't have the particular details to answer today, but I would be happy to follow up to provide that information.
Could you do that within the week?
Yes, Senator.
And I think you understand the question. I'd like details on when these pilots are going to be ready, how many are now flying, what the status of the training is, both in the United States, apparently in Arizona, and in Romania and other countries where they may be under instruction. You make reference in your testimony and again in the answers to specific questions to steps you would take to recruit and retain pilots, one of the great challenges right now. Can you be more specific about why the Air Force faces that shortage? Obviously, commercial demand for pilots is very much a factor, but also what can be done to strengthen recruitment and retention?
Senator, thank you for raising this question. And if confirmed, this would be a priority area of focus for me. Specifically on the pilot shortage, it's due, as you noted, to a combination of factors. It's the competitiveness of the commercial airline industry and the pay and benefits that they offer. It's the availability of instructors for the simulators that are needed to train pilots, and it's also the training aircraft availability. So all of those factors coming together make it quite challenging right now to produce enough pilots. But I understand that the Department of Air Force is working to address that, and you would have my commitment to enable that as well. More broadly for recruitment, I think there's a number of things that we can do to strengthen the Air Force's recruitment approach. One is to ensure that we're maximizing the full suite of outreach tools through social media, both traditional and non-traditional forms. I understand the Department of the Air Force has established an e-recruiter cell and is doing a lot more digital engagement to try to reach hard-to-reach communities across the nation. But my approach would be to leverage best practices, come up with innovative solutions, and establish new partnerships to help tackle this challenge, and certainly would look forward to working with you to address it.
Thank you. I'd like to ask all the members of the panel this question. Consistently and constantly, we hear about the lack of capacity in our defense industrial base, whether it's 155 millimeter shells or artillery or drones. We hear about shortages of skilled manpower, other kinds of limitations on our defense industrial base. What do you think is necessary to increase that capacity?
I'll kind of thank you for that opportunity to provide input here. It's, again, inspiring, hiring, retraining, and then retaining our current workforce. I think once you've set that example of retaining and showing how it's a great place to work, it's exciting, and the opportunity to really help our country, I think that's often been what captures someone's attention as they begin to look for a job. I look at programs like the SMART program, which offers funding for students working as interns as well, and then they come and work by giving back their time. It's similar to what we call co-op or the Pathways program for the federal agencies. So something of that nature would really help us to grow those ranks.
Any others?
Sure. Yes, Senator. So I'll just focus very quickly on one area. We need to find ways of being able to leverage our expertise in commercial software to bring it to the defense industry base in reliable and effective and safe ways. Obviously, that's a challenge because they don't test the systems quite the way we do often. So being able to make sure that the testing and evaluation community can apply the appropriate testing techniques, tactics, and tools to make sure the commercial software works effectively in our military systems is crucially important.
My time has expired, so I will welcome any other thoughts any of the witnesses have on that point in writing. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal. Senator Ernst, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning. Secretary Dalton, Dr. Schmidt, and Dr. Ericson. It is very nice to have you all here today, and thank you for your service to our great nation. Ms. Dalton, we're going to follow on with a theme that you've heard from many of the members already today, and that's starting with the crisis at our southern border. So you may have noticed in the news, we have a lot of candidates. They came through Iowa. Many of them are talking about the issues that are really important to Americans. Top two issues, one is the economy and the other is the crisis at the southern border. So, Ms. Dalton, in your time as the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Homeland Defense and Hemispheric Affairs at the Department of Defense, you played a key role in the department's plans regarding the disposal of unused border wall construction materials to protect the homeland. And at the end of DoD's disposition process to transfer these materials, there were exactly 14,795 steel tubes remaining. Do you know how much the taxpayers initially paid for these unused materials?
Senator, thank you for raising this really important challenge, which is the crisis at our southern border. In my time as Assistant Secretary, I have conducted regular visits to the southwest border to understand the strain that is being placed on our states, local authorities, and Border Patrol. And just in FY23, the Department of Defense has provided $608 million in border security support to DHS and counter-narcotics support to DHS and other federal departments and agencies.
The question would be, do you know how much the materials cost?
So for the specific materials, Senator, I know that in our August letter that was seeking to be responsive, collecting information from across the department, because this is not in my portfolio. I understand from the Defense Logistics Agency that at that time it was $130,000.
Okay, that was to safeguard those materials. The actual cost to the taxpayers for those materials was $4.4 million. And then with the disposition through the DLA, do you know how much the department auctioned them off for?
Senator, I would have to defer to the Defense Logistics Agency because they are the lead proponent in the Department of Defense for this issue. It is not in my portfolio, Senator.
So I guess I'm struggling to understand because maybe your portfolio doesn't include defense of the homeland?
Senator, it includes defense support of civil authorities, which is when the Department of Homeland Security sends requests to the Department of Defense for support. We evaluate those requests to determine if they're legal, if it's appropriate use of the U.S. military per posse comitatus, if it is going to impact training and readiness for our U.S. military given our warfighting primary mission. And then we provide those recommendations based on the input of components across the Department of Defense to the Secretary of Defense for a decision. I have no role to play, Senator.
So civil authorities are not used in constructing border materials or would not have any regards for securing our southern border?
We have not received a request from the Department of Homeland Security to use DoD forces in that manner, and so that request has not come through my office.
Okay. So based on the information that was provided to us by the Department of Defense, back to the original question, the materials were actually sold to a private buyer for $156,000. So I understand you're saying it's not under your portfolio, and yet you responded to a letter that was sent in regards to this. So I guess you can understand why the committee is having a hard time understanding how you're saying somebody else is in charge of this, and yet you're responding to a written request from Congress.
Senator, I was sent a letter from several members of Congress, and because I am a Senate-confirmed official, I take that very seriously. Although this issue is not in my portfolio, I went on a fact-finding mission with my team to collect inputs from across the Department of Defense, from those that have oversight and responsibility for this issue, in order to answer the questions that
I appreciate that. I am running out of time. So what I want our taxpayers to understand, though, is it seems that we have a number of different entities within the Department of Defense that are completely siloed. And while you're doing a fact-finding mission, you know, across the board and going to other departments, you didn't take the time to question and follow up in a timely manner. It did take about 5 months to respond to that letter. You simply could have responded, since you take congressional oversight very seriously. You could have responded back to the chairman or back to the ranking member stating that this belongs to another entity within the Department of Defense. But you did go on that fact-finding mission, taking some of that responsibility upon yourself. And unfortunately for our taxpayers, we now see that these materials have been sold for pennies on the dollar, about 3 cents for every dollar that the federal government spent on it. And yet we have some additional auctions that are coming up where people are reselling the materials that they just bought from DLA, and they have been receiving 10 times as much as what they paid to get those tubes from the federal government. So there's a big scheme going on here where people are making a ton of money off of the taxpayers. And so we've got to get to the bottom of this. I appreciate your answers and the follow-up 5 months after the letter was sent, but more to follow. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Ernst. Senator Hirono, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to each of our nominees. Welcome to your families. I asked the following 2 initial questions relating to a nominee's fitness to serve for all of the nominees who come before any of my committees on which I sit, and we'll start with Dr. Schmidt and just go right down the line. Since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No.
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 Have you ever faced discrimination, faced discipline, or entered into a settlement related to this kind of conduct?
No.
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 For all of you, cruise, hypersonic, and ballistic missiles continue to present a complex threat, particularly in the Indo-PACOM AOR, and the Department of Defense's approach to missile defense in this region is split across multiple organizations, including Missile Defense Agency, Space Development Agency, the Air Force, Indo-PACOM, and NORTHCOM. This begs the question of whether there is duplication of effort or stovepipes in the technological development required for this important mission. For all of you, how would you work across agencies to ensure that the Department of Defense is developing the most advanced solution to our missile defense challenges?
Senator-
Dr. Schmidt?
Senator, it's very important that we have effective missile defense, particularly for the new generation of hypersonic missiles. Speaking from an operational testing perspective, I would work very closely with members of the Test Resource Management Center, as well as the service labs, in order to make sure we have the appropriate environments, the long-range test corridors for doing the testing, make sure that we have the appropriate sky-based assets, such as Sky Range, to be able to test the information effectively, and also make sure that the workforce, both in the operational testing community and other parts, have the appropriate skills and resources to do their job effectively, if confirmed.
Secretary Dalton?
Senator, thank you. And I appreciate you highlighting this critical issue. Having worked on the Missile Defense Review, I know how vital it is for us to address the missile defense for our homeland and across regions of great importance. I understand that the Department of the Air Force is the acquisition authority for air and cruise missile defense of the homeland and has been working with OSD acquisition and sustainment to determine the appropriate acquisition and management activities that are necessary to integrate the collective efforts across the department. And the success of the joint force can only come from the full integration of resources and capabilities. That starts with defining what our priorities are that flow from our strategic guidance documents, such as the MDR and the NDS, and then pulling those through our program budget review process every year.
Yes,
So you have my commitment to do that.
Since the Air Force is the entity, but we have all these other entities involved, and when that happens, there's a tendency for people not to be getting together. So my expectation is that should you be confirmed, this is an area, missile defense, and particularly, of course, with regard to Hawaii, is an area that you will pay attention to. One more thing for you, Secretary Dalton. I was at Joint Base Pearl Harbor, Hickam, and I saw the disrepair of the Hickam Airfield parking ramp, which endangers the Air Force readiness and PACAF's ability to project power from Hawaii. Now, we need all of the services' commitment to ensure infrastructure will support mission readiness, and I found it just totally unacceptable that these ramp areas cannot support the kind of planes, the planes that we need to take off should there be anything relating to, for example, Taiwan. So, Ms. Dalton, very briefly, how do you intend to address infrastructure across the Air Force? And I'd really like to see a request in the next NDAA about the particular, with regard to the ramp situation at Hickam.
Senator, I agree with you that we need to ensure that we have resilient and operable infrastructure, particularly for the Indo-Pacific, given the PRC pacing challenge. And the runway that you highlight is one of those critical nodes for our access, spacing, and overflight. And so, if confirmed, you have my commitment to ensure that we're making the necessary investments to ensure that we have resiliency in our infrastructure to meet our operational objectives.
My time is up, but Mr. Chairman, I just want to mention for Dr. Ericson, I'm very glad that you are so focused on the need to support STEM, particularly for women and minorities, because we are not paying attention to, I would say, 50% of our population. And I actually have a bill that would support and promote STEM education for women and minorities, and that bill happens to be in the Judiciary Committee, but obviously you have a lot of familiarity with how important STEM backgrounds are for our hiring purposes and the people that we need for DOD so that we can keep our competitive advantage. So should you be confirmed, I'm really going to be very interested in what kind of programmatic things you are going to pursue to make sure that in your, what we call in Hawaii, Kuleana, your area of responsibility, that you are very much promoting STEM for women and minorities. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Rona. Senator Tuberville, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for being here today. Huge responsibility. I think hopefully we all understand here in your position that we don't work for a president, we don't work for a party, we work for the taxpayers and the citizens of this country. I've been here 3 years. We're going on $1 trillion a year budget in the military. The biggest threat to our national security is going to be our debt. We'll be at 40 trillion before we know it. And so y'all have huge responsibilities protecting our country, building the best military ever, and also making sure that we're able to afford it in the future. Dr. Ericson, I'm proud of what you've been saying about STEM. I'm from Alabama, Huntsville. You've been to Huntsville several times, being at NASA. We're huge in the ESOP business, employee-owned small businesses. What's your thoughts about those? And again, my thoughts, if just knowing what I know about Huntsville with 400 or 500 of them, we couldn't survive, anything to do with NASA, missile defense, if we didn't have the small businesses and take care of, make sure that they're competitive.
Senator Tuberville, thank you for acknowledging our Huntsville facilities. I've also had the fortune of having an Alabama student this year working with me, an intern. I wrote 17 different recommendations for him, and he's now in grad school. So it is critical, the small business. I believe that America is built on the back of small businesses. We don't get too big without small, right? And so for me, it's been something that I've been very vehemently, supporting, because that community it's just so important. So my ideas are to listen, learn, and share, to create roadshows and workshops to help small businesses through this onerous process that they often have to invoke on to just get selected, and then also helping them through the valleys of death that we've identified. It is critical that we are ultimately going to provide other sources of resources like venture capitalism, commercial industry, partnering with them to maybe bring that to bed and manufacture. So I look at several different ways that we hopefully will support those small businesses and ultimately provide the innovative technology we need.
Thank you. Secretary Dalton, I'm sure you've fed up a little bit with this border wall. We all are. I know people in Alabama that's bought border wall for 10 cents on the dollar, $300,000 worth for $30,000, razor wire for 20 cents on the dollar. The American taxpayer, I mean, we're all in this together. They don't deserve this. They don't deserve to pay this top dollar and then lose money on something that we probably should be using anyway. And you're getting ready to go into a job that's going to control $200 billion in the Air Force. And as you get into this job, if confirmed, hopefully you'll look back going, hey, I've got to do a better job. Whether it's my responsibility or somebody else's, we all see what's going on. And so we've got to protect our country. We've got to protect the taxpayers. Dr. Ericson, what is your assessment of the defense systems that we've sent to Ukraine and Israel, the success that we've had? What's your thoughts?
Senator, did you mean to direct that to
Dr.
Schmidt?
Dr.
Thank
Schmidt,
you.
yeah.
Senator Tuberville, I have not had a chance to understand yet, because I haven't been confirmed, what we're actually providing to Ukraine. But if confirmed to this position, I will take a very careful look at that, especially from the point of view of ensuring that the systems that we do provide are effective, suitable, survivable, and lethal, and be happy to meet with you and your staff.
The one thing I want you to look into is that recently I met with some sailors, some naval officers that have been on some of these ships shooting down some of these drones in the Red Sea. And their concern is we're spending $1 million on a missile shooting down a $5,000 drone. And that's something we can't afford. So eventually we've got to get to the point where we understand that we don't need to lose any vessel. We got to make sure that we protect ourselves, but we also need to be able to identify and use the right things that we need to use that are not costly, because, as I said, we're getting close to $1 trillion. What's your thoughts on that?
Senator Tuberville, that's an incredibly important issue. As I understand it, there's a lot of work on lighter weight, cheaper, yet still effective weapon systems such as directed energy. Many of those weapon systems are based on advanced R&D. I would be very committed, if confirmed, to making sure the testing procedures we use for those systems make sure that they are in fact capable of doing their job at, as you mentioned, a fraction of the cost in order to protect the warfighters who are in harm's way.
Thank you. And one other thing I just want to say real quick is saving money, but we spend a lot of money, and we need to have the best. I will say that. But for 10 years, we've been trying to build this KC-46, and we continue to give a company a second and a third and a fourth chance. Talking to Admiral Aquilino in the Indo-Pacific, we need a long-range tanker. We have got to have, and to continue to give a company second, third, and fourth, fifth chances to build something that they obviously can't build, we need to sometimes look at another alternative. So I hope you would do that. You, Secretary Dalton, and you, Dr. Schmidt, when you get in your position.
Absolutely, Senator. Yes, I'll look into that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Tuberville. Senator King, please.
I want to follow up on Senator Tuberville's questions. It's actually worse than he said. The missiles that we're using to shoot down a $2,000 drone cost $2 to $4 million apiece. That's like shooting a duck with a howitzer. And we are woefully behind on the issue of directed energy. Dr. Ericson, that's one of the areas where we have hypersonics and directed energy, we have lost the race. or we are badly losing the race. There is a ship now, to you, Dr. Schmidt, there's a ship called the USS Preble that has directed energy capability. It's in San Diego. It ought to be in the Red Sea. Don't you think the Red Sea would be a good place to test this ship right now rather than on who knows what in the Pacific?
Senator, I don't have enough knowledge to know what state of readiness that system is in, but to your point, the faster we can get these systems to the fight and make sure they're going to work when they get there, the better.
Well, my understanding is that this ship is in testing and training in San Diego, then it's going to Japan. I hope you'll take back to the department that maybe it ought to go to the Red Sea so we're not spending $2 million for every bullet that we're firing at $2,000 Houthi drones. Dr. Ericson, hypersonics and directed energy. We've got a lot of catch-up to do. This should be a hair-on-fire, urgent priority. Do you agree?
Senator, yes, I do. I'm always excited when I hear about hypersonics, and I'm hoping that maybe some of the technology we're developing at NASA, particularly with the X-59, if there's ways that we can infuse that and bring together the two different agencies, the Department of Defense and our agency, to maybe further that technology.
Well, the other piece is defense against hypersonics. That's another place where we've fallen down. Chinese hypersonic advantage renders a lot of our forward deployment strategy in the Pacific ineffective if we don't have a defense against their hypersonic missiles. I hope defense against hypersonics is a high priority as well.
Yes, sir. I will definitely, it's part of my portfolio to make sure we transition that critical technology early. And so I will work with across the departments to help us do that.
I'd like to see urgency here. Now, you've mentioned several times about small businesses. We've had testimony before this committee, and I've talked to a number of small businesses in the tech sector that have simply given up doing business with the Department of Defense. Too much bureaucracy, too much forms, too much time. So if you're serious about tapping the energy and inventiveness of our small businesses, that's got to change. And I would urge you to set up some kind of listening program to find out where the bottlenecks are, where the problems are. Why is a 12-person engineering firm that's onto something important simply not going to bother coming to the Department of Defense? Is that something that you think you might be able to undertake in order to try to find why smaller businesses aren't doing business with us?
Senator, you know how they say great minds think alike? Well, that is exactly what I have in mind. I'm looking forward to having roadshows and opportunities to have workshops and to listen and learn. I understand that some of the problems that the Department of Defense has with their cyber programs are very similar to what we've experienced in NASA, and those are some of the things that we were able to do. So bringing those lessons learned to this community would be an asset, I think, which is valuable if I'm to be confirmed.
I urge you to do that and would suggest you think about how do we make the fewer forms. How many pages have to be submitted? How big is the RFP? I don't have it with me, but the RFP for a new handgun was this thick. We've got to be thinking about setting reasonable requirements. Dr. Schmidt, as far as testing are concerned, a lot of testimony we've had with regard to the Chinese approach to these things, like hypersonics, is they're not afraid to fail. SpaceX has that same philosophy. They learn from failure. We seem to have this idea that every test has to be successful. I hope that you'll think about and look at the way the Chinese conduct their R&D, which involves testing, failing, and then getting it right, rather than a focus entirely on every test has to work. Do you see my point?
Senator King, having worked in commercial software technology for decades, the fail fast, learn fast model is something that I'm very deeply aware of and appreciate. Naturally, we also have to balance that with making sure we don't harm things when we test, but that's where particular technology advances in high-fidelity synthetic environments and modeling and simulation environments where we can fail repeatedly and learn from our lessons without necessarily putting people in harm's way.
Final question, Secretary Dalton, KC-46, the 101st Refueling Ring in Bangor, affectionately known as the Maniacs, could use those airplanes. We've got to get them out there. We've got to have that technology of air supply, of fuel supply. We're facing a gap if we don't get this right. So I hope that continued pressure is being put on Boeing to solve the visual problem and to get those airplanes out there, and I hope to see some of them going to Bangor.
Senator, first of all, my mom is from Bangor, so I have a special corner of my heart for
Congratulations.
Bangor.
You just got my vote.
To the point, for the KC-46, this is vital for us to be able to win the war with that refueling capability. It provides, also opportunities as we look at the strategic basing process to see what are the requirements, what can line up in terms of the installation to support those requirements. And so you do have my commitment to look at this particular issue set to make sure we're meeting our objectives.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator King. Senator Budd, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you and good morning to the nominees for being here. Secretary Dalton, thanks for meeting in my office last week. I've got a few questions. Appreciate a simple yes or no when able, so that we can get through all these. So in your current role, you have direct responsibility for policy and planning oversight of defense support of civilian authorities, including the military support of the Department of Homeland Security at the southwest border. That's correct?
Yes.
Right, thanks. So in our discussion, you mentioned taking multiple trips to the southwest border in the last year and witnessing firsthand the immigration crisis. Is that correct?
Yes.
So in our meeting, you acknowledged that there is, in your words, some utility in employing barriers at the border. Is that correct?
Senator, as part of a system
Let's try
of border
to stick to yes and no.
As part of a system of border security management, in my personal view, I believe a border barrier can
So
help
wait, I'm
mitigate
just
the flow.
going back to in our meeting, you did acknowledge that there's some utility in employing barriers, correct?
As part of a system of border security management.
So I take that as a yes. So it should come as no surprise to anyone that employing barriers would help redirect the movement of large groups of people to ensure economy of force. And if Border Patrol was able to deploy more effectively, then DHS demand for DoD support would ultimately go down. And it seems that would be in everyone's best interest. Do you agree with that? It would be in everyone's best interest if DHS demand for DoD support would ultimately go down?
Senator, I believe that if DHS was fully resourced for its mission, its statutory lead role in border security, then we could reduce the demand on DoD.
And that would be good, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so it's why my colleagues and I are concerned about the administration's decision to auction off border wall materials rather than install them and actually help Border Patrol do their job. Now, I've been there. We talked about that. I've seen the materials feet away from the intended wall. So what really concerned me, though, was when I asked, given your border visits, whether you had either advocated personally for a change in policy regarding the use of border wall materials or even been part of any conversation internally to do so. And you stated, and I quote, "It's not my job to advocate for a change in policy. It's my job to implement what the administration tells me," end quote. Now, Secretary Dalton, you've been nominated to serve as the #2 civilian in the Air Force. And that position demands independent judgment and leadership. So when faced with tough decisions, including the ones you may disagree with, are you just going to do what those over you tell you to do, or should we expect different?
Senator, the President made a day one decision to halt construction of the border wall. I am a member of the administration, and so I am part of the team that is implementing his policies across the board. The border barrier issue and the disposition of the materials does not fall into my portfolio. If confirmed as Undersecretary of the Air Force, my job would be to advise
I understand, but
Kendall.
you've taken it upon yourself to go on personal fact-finding missions, which you said a few questions ago. So I appreciate the latitude that you do have. I wish you would have used some here. So I want to change gears, Secretary Dalton. I've been a strong advocate for not letting the fighter capacity gap between the United States and China continue to grow. We spoke briefly about that. So what do you think is the proper tactical fighter inventory mix that the Air Force should maintain? And what's the right mix of 4th and 5th generation aircraft that we should maintain while at the same time we're investing in 6th generation? Fighters are in demand around the world, not just for potential China fight. So what are your thoughts there?
Senator, well, first of all, thank you so much for your support at Seymour Johnson, and I did enjoy our conversation about the support that your state is providing. If confirmed, I would look forward to supporting Secretary Kendall in his vision to reoptimize the Department of the Air Force for great power competition, and that includes looking at the force design for the Air Force and the Space Force going forward to ensure that we strike the right balance between modernizing our capabilities, but also being ready for any contingencies that we may face today or in the current security environment going forward. There is a balance to be struck there. It's a strategy that is not without risk, but it is far riskier to find ourselves in a conflict with the PRC and not have the right capabilities to operate in a contested environment.
Thank you. I yield.
Thank you very much, Senator Budd. Senator Warren, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to all of our nominees, and welcome to your families. Dr. Schmidt, you have been selected to head up the testing office that was created to provide Congress and the public with the unvarnished truth about whether the planes and tanks and ships that service members operate are safe and effective. There is no greater responsibility. In November, a V-22 Osprey crashed during a training accident in Japan, killing 8, including one of my constituents, Staff Sergeant Jake Gallagher. An investigation is currently underway, but we already know that the Osprey has had a troubled history of safety problems. The job of the testing office that you would head up is to bring those concerns to light and to help prevent future accidents like this one and save lives. One of the ways that the office is supposed to do that is through its annual report. While we need to keep our most sensitive secrets classified, this committee often sees DOD using designations like, quote, controlled unclassified information, close quote, to keep the public in the dark, meaning that the information is not actually classified, but the military wants to keep the information away from the public nonetheless. Dr. Schmidt, if confirmed, do you commit to ensuring that the testing office's report informs the public as much as possible about the problems that we need to fix in order to make sure that our weapons are safe?
Yes, Senator, to the maximal extent possible, indeed.
Right. That's what I want to hear. You know, defense contractors and even our military services sometimes have other priorities, like making the testing process faster or glossing over problems to keep these weapons programs on schedule. But the testing office is supposed to be an independent referee. If the testing office determines that a weapon is unsafe, you have an obligation to say that you can't recommend buying more of it, even if we've already spent billions of dollars on it, and even if the contractors are pounding on your door, pressuring you to give your stamp of approval. So, Dr. Schmidt, do you promise that you will come to this committee and tell the public if you conclude that a system is not safe for our service members to operate?
Senator, the independence of this office is crucially important, and I will do everything and work with you and your committee as much as possible to make sure we get the systems to the fight that work and safeguard our servicemen and women.
And you will come to this committee if you feel like there's inappropriate pressure on your office?
Senator, if I see inappropriate issues that I'm not able to address through my own means, I will come and discuss them with the committee.
All right. Because ensuring the safety of our service members means standing up for transparency and against any pressure that would compromise the integrity of the testing process. It is essential that your conduct be above reproach. Even the appearance of bias in your assessments of the safety of our weapons programs would be a mortal wound to your office and to your ability to advocate for our service members. I do not ever want us to have to tell another military family that we ask their son or their daughter to buckle into a piece of equipment that we knew was unsafe. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Warren. Senator Mullen, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Dalton, I did enjoy visiting with you and actually all three of you all in the office. And I asked you this question while you were in there, and I would like for you to be as precise as possible. Could you please explain in roughly 60 seconds why you're qualified to be the Undersecretary of the Air Force?
Senator, I have a deep appreciation for our service members, and though I have not worn the uniform myself, I have been on the same team with them since I was 22 years old, and I have family members that have also served. If confirmed, I would work with officers and enlisted leaders to ensure that we're providing the best possible care and support for our airmen and guardians that they certainly deserve. I also wanted to share just a very short story. In 2010, when I was a career civil servant, I turned down an opportunity at the White House to serve on the National Security Council to deploy as a civilian advisor to Afghanistan because I believed that's where my country needed me the most at that time. And as a defense civilian, I thought it was important to understand what it was like to work in an operational command in wartime. In my over 20 years in defense, I have learned that civil-military dialogue is vital to provide the best possible options and potential solutions to the Secretary of Defense and the President. And in our democracy, Senator, we are fortunate to have civilian oversight of the military.
Listen, I'm trying to give you as much leeway as possible for you to describe why you're qualified to be the Undersecretary of the Air Force. Understanding the duties, and I'll read it pretty plain here, the duties and responsibilities responsible for the affairs of the Air Force, Space Force, including organizing, training, equipping both services for the welfare of approximately 700,000 active duty guards, reserves, civilian, and personnel, oversees an annual budget of more than $173 billion in direct strategies, policy development, risk management, purchasing of weapons, technology investment, and human resource management. I'm just looking for qualifications. You didn't give me any qualifications. You gave me your history, your story. But what makes you qualified to be the Undersecretary of the Air Force? We're at a serious, critical time right now in this country. And we need the best and the brightest. And I'm sure you're great, and I'm sure you're extremely bright. But are you the best to be the Undersecretary of the Air Force? I don't see it. That's no stab at you. I'm just saying that at a time when we're trading over transitions from future fighters, from aircraft, from weapons systems. We're getting transition out of the war of terror, going into conventional warfare. We're behind in a lot of systems that we're trying to get to. The Air Force plays a pivotal role in this. The National Guard is getting divested of aircraft on a daily basis with nothing in reserve for them to be able to pick up. That's a direct reflect to our homeland. And the Undersecretary is going to be involved in all this with decision-making. And I'm having a very hard time to see your qualifications on this. This is why I gave you time to explain it. And you go into a story about being on the same team and about, you turn down a position to another political position to be able to run in and to be, sent to Afghanistan, which I don't undermine that at all. I just don't see how that makes you qualified. That doesn't make you a bad person. I just don't think you're the best person for the job right now. And that's what we're looking for right now. We're trying to recruit the best and the brightest men and women to join our armed services to begin with. We need to know that they had the best and the brightest leading them too. And unfortunately, I don't feel like that's you. I'll yield back.
Thank you, Senator Mullen. Senator Peters, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Dalton, as I believe you know, the Air Force has recently announced that Selfridge Air National Guard Base in Michigan will receive a future squadron of 12 new KC-46 refueling tankers, which will replace an aging fleet of tankers that we currently have. I think this announcement certainly demonstrates Selfridge's tremendous value to the Air Force. And it also ensures that Selfridge will continue to play a key role in securing our national defense for decades to come. And while I'm thrilled, and folks all around the Selfridge Air National Guard base are thrilled with the decision, we are also, all of us together, in a strong bipartisan way, are committed to making sure that we can have a future fighter mission to replace aging A-10s that are currently stationed there. So with this in mind, and in the formal basing announcements, we had with Secretary Kendall, he expressed in no uncertain terms that Selfridge in no way is precluded from getting a fighter mission, even though we have just received this KC-46 mission and an increase in aircraft. We're still will be considered for future fighter missions. And so my question for you, ma'am, is if confirmed, will you maintain the Air Force's ongoing commitment to ensure that Selfridge is not precluded from competing for a future fighter mission? And will you also commit to ensuring that Selfridge is fully considered for future fighter basing missions?
Senator Peters, first of all, thank you and to your state for hosting Selfridge and the tremendous capability that it has afforded the Air Force. Going forward, I know as the Department of the Air Force is looking at bringing new capabilities online and as new requirements are therefore defined, we have to look at what is the right fit for any given installation. And working through the strategic basing process to ensure that we've got analytic rigor to back that up that is repeatable no matter what basing location that the department is looking at. So if confirmed, you have my commitment to have an open conversation and ongoing dialogue with you, with the local authorities, with the installation commander as the Air Force reviews what requirements we have going forward if confirmed, and to ensure that we've got the right match for any given base to include Selfridge.
Well, very good. Mr. Dalton, as you know, the Indo-Pacific is certainly the DoD's priority combatant theater right now. The return of great power competition as a threat to the United States is on full display that we watch every day with China and Russia trying to alter the rules-based international order. And this theater comes with some unique challenges and significant challenges that you're well aware of, requiring both strategic and versatile aircraft like the KC-46 that will be stationed at Selfridge Air National Guard. So with this in mind, would you please share for the committee the role that the KC-46 are going to play in the Indo-Pacific as part of the broader national security strategy and why these are going to be essential aircraft for decades to come?
Senator, thank you. And as you highlighted, the PRC is our most consequential strategic competitor, and it's with a great sense of urgency that we need to move forward to ensure that we're investing in the capabilities that can deter aggression and, if called upon, to fight and win the nation's wars. The fact of the matter is, in any given scenario, our tanker refueling capability is vital for us to be able to conduct and sustain operations over great distances that we may find ourselves in, certainly in the Indo-Pacific. And so I understand that the Department of the Air Force is moving out on the modernization efforts for the KC-46 and also to ensure the uninterrupted recapitalization of current capabilities so that we don't have a gap in being able to deliver for our warfighting capability. And if confirmed, you have my commitment to review that force design and to ensure that we continue to meet the moment in terms of the capability that needs to be delivered.
Right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Peters. Senator Schmidt, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to direct my questions to Secretary Dalton. You have mentioned in your opening statement that you promise to timely account, in a timely manner, account for information. You want to provide information to this committee. That is a statement about what you intend to do. But I think what's been brought out in this committee thus far is you haven't done that. And so when you're before this committee for a promotion, all we can do is look at your track record, and that isn't your track record. And on an issue that, by the way, is not some footnote in a white paper, we're talking about the border wall that has been the topic of much conversation in this country for a long time. And I know you have your prepared statement, and I find it perhaps more alarming that your response is, you keep saying it's not in your portfolio. With all due respect, you're the assistant secretary for this, actually for Homeland Defense. And that doesn't cut it. I can't, so in Missouri and most places in the country, $130,000 is twice the amount an average family makes in a year. Under your watch, we were paying to store these materials $130,000 a day. In any other time in this town, prior to now where the news cycle is so fast, that would have been a scandal. But the idea that we're just supposed to wish this away now by saying it's not under your portfolio falls short. So either you knew and you didn't do anything about it, or you didn't know, which is what you're saying, until the letter came before you, and then you engage in your fact-finding mission, which perhaps is more concerning. And then after that, in the letter you say, well, we're mitigating those costs now. It's not $130,000 a day, it's $160,000 a month because we're selling this off. So to add insult to injury, by one account, one company was able to purchase $4.4 million worth of steel tubes for just $156,000. Do you think, ma'am, do you think that's a good deal for the taxpayers?
Senator, you have my commitment for any resources that fall under my portfolio that.
Well, no,
I will
okay,
be as
forget
steward.
about your portfolio, what's in your portfolio. We've established that you don't take responsibility. I'm asking you, is that a good deal for taxpayers?
No.
Okay, and so now we're in a situation, and by the way, it's worth pointing out too, in the auction of these materials, it has been reported that they are purposely not to be referred to as anything related to Trump, Mexico, or the controversial border wall. So I think it's important for the American citizens to understand that this is being described to contractors on this auction, I guess, that they are referred to as steel tubing and sticks for industrial construction. Ma'am, do you think that is obfuscating what's happening here? Of the selling off of these materials, to not be honest about what's actually happening?
Senator, I did not write the way that that was described, so I would have to defer to those that did. I believe that we need to provide transparency, certainly to Congress and to the American people on all matters related to national defense.
So I think in my limited time, I just want to say, it's not personal, but I think what you're gathering from the tenor of these questions, you are being nominated for the #2 civilian position at the Department of Defense. That has enormous responsibility. And the idea that everything that's bad, or on such an issue of that is high profile, the American people want our border to be secure. They also want us to be good stewards of their tax dollars. Neither one of those things are happening. It's sort of the worst of all worlds. And now this administration is actually, I guess, starting to construct a border wall, parts of it. But the idea that your unwillingness to sort of account for this and take responsibility, to me, is a much bigger issue. Because there's going to be something that happens where this committee and the United States Senate or Congress has to rely on you being forthcoming. You've shown that you won't be. Take responsibility. You've shown that you won't be, in a very dangerous time. And you were charged with a very important job that had to do with our southern border. And your response time and time again was, I have no responsibilities here whatsoever. And that's unfortunate. I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Schmidt. Senator Rosen, please.
Well, thank you, Chairman Reed. I appreciate you holding this hearing, and I really want to thank the nominees for being here today, for your willingness to serve and do these jobs here in our country. I want to talk a little bit about, just switching gears altogether, our mental health resources and support systems, because we know how important they are. It's critically important for our service members, particularly in my state of Nevada, for those facing the high operational demands at installations like Creech and Nellis Air Force Base, right? So given the unique challenges of these airmen, guardians, and their families they encounter, including the crews at Chief, they They fly that remotely piloted aircraft. They fly the drones. They fly them in overseas combat. More needs to be done to ensure that they have adequate mental resources are available for that type of work. They're not in the theater, but they are, right? They're maybe piloting from Nevada. So Secretary Dalton, if you're confirmed, how would you further strengthen mental health support systems within the Department of Air Force? And specifically, what targeted initiatives could the department implement to ensure that our airmen and guardians, as well as their families, have better access to more robust support as the mission is newer missions, right, with technology?
Senator, thank you so much for raising this vital issue, and I believe that our service members and their families deserve the best possible care for their service and sacrifice to our country. Healthcare is also important for readiness of the force, and whether you're flying drones out of Creech Air Force Base or you're deployed in the Indo-Pacific, there are unique stressors that may be particular to the individual, to the unit, and we need to be cognizant of that variation across the force. And so I believe that we need to take deliberate efforts to destigmatize mental health. So, and there's more that certainly can be done in that regard. I know the Department of the Air Force is working to implement the Brandon Act, working with Congress and OSD to implement that. I think that will go a long way to providing more programming and access for those that are experiencing mental health issues. And we need to lower the barriers for those that are seeking help as well, to ensure timely access, to ensure that resources are targeted for the particular individual, and also given the national shortage of mental health providers, we need to be able to connect the right people in the right place. So you have my commitment, if confirmed, to address this.
I want to keep on this just a little bit, because I want to talk again about the remotely piloted crews like at Creech. They are eligible to receive mental health services, but for them, when they hang up their uniform and leave the service, there is no identifier on their record for their combat operations, although they're flying the plane in combat operations. So they aren't allowed to receive their guaranteed mental health services through the VA. Of course, in FY24, the NDAA included my amendment that requires a report establishing a combat status identifier so that RPA crews, well, they have something to justify their need for mental health services from the VA once they complete their time in service. So if confirmed, how would you seek to rectify this kind of unique problem?
Senator, thank you for highlighting the unique features that are facing the service members serving at Creech, and you have my commitment, if confirmed, to understand what more we can do in terms of creative solutions to ensure that there is equitable access to mental health programs and resources.
Thank you. I'm going to move on now to Dr. Ericson and talk about maintaining our defense technological edge, because global competition, declining R&D, contracting challenges, and the STEM workforce gap, well, these are just a few of the impediments that we know are eroding our technological edge over our adversaries, particularly China. Compounding these issues is a lack of available and easy accessible private capital to support defense-focused small business, which has stunted growth and innovation across our country. So, Dr. Ericson, if confirmed, you would oversee an extensive portfolio that includes the small business innovation research and small business technology transfer programs, both of which are crucial for fostering innovation across the defense sector. So can you talk about how this public-private partnership model helps scale defense contracted small businesses? We have a lot of those in Nevada. And what can you do to ensure that that is continued and their continued success?
Senator Rosen, thank you for kind of highlighting all of that's under the particular portfolio for this role. And if I'm confirmed, I'm committed to really supporting the small businesses. It's something that I've been doing for some time at the NASA Goddard Space Flight Center and for the agency. I mentioned before that it actually is the backbone of our country, and that's why it's such a critical component. They offer unique ideas in these small businesses, and what I see is a really listening to them and hearing the issues that have really sort of retarded their ability to do it in a timely fashion. Ultimately, we want to transition these components, or in what we say at NASA, infuse them into our missions. I want to also be able to really reach out to the younger generation, graduate students who have that ability to apply for the STTR programs as well. I had one in your state this summer, Abraham Costada, and he was from Nevada. He also had issues with the mental capacity with his family members, and so I'm very sensitive to how we treat our people and how we can infuse them and partner with this STEM ecosystem that you mentioned. So I hope that I look forward to really working with you in your state and reaping some of the rewards from Nevada.
Well, thank you. We don't get enough of those awards, and so we look forward to you coming to Nevada and talking to our businesses so we can contribute as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Rosen. Senator Scott, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Ms. Dalton, the 350th Spectrum Warfare Wing, activated in 2021, will be a critical player in the fight against Communist China. They currently have over 330 positions to fill that they can't because they don't have the mission space to allow these people to work. So can you tell me what you're going to do to rectify that?
Senator, thank you so much for the call last week, and thank you for hosting the Spectrum Wing, as well as your considerable support from the state of Florida for space operations. As we discussed, Senator, given the contested operating environment that we find ourselves in, and certainly would find ourselves in a conflict with the PRC, it's absolutely critical that we are both have.
Can I stop you just for a second?
Yep.
Can you just give me, what are you going to do to fix it? That's one issue. That's
Senator,
all I really care about.
You have my commitment to dig into the particulars if confirmed, and to work with you on a pathway forward.
Okay. Can we just go back? When you were Secretary, Undersecretary of Homeland Security, did you feel responsible for the border?
I did, Senator, and that's why I've made repeated visits there.
So did you ever tell Secretary Mayorkas that he was doing a crappy job?
No, Senator.
So does it bother you that 70,000 people are dying of fentanyl overdose in the country?
It does, very much.
What'd you do? You sold off property. You didn't build the wall. We got terrorists come across our country. We got criminals across our country. We have 8 million people coming unvetted. You're the Undersecretary of Homeland Security. It's the biggest issue in my state. And I can't imagine what it's like in Texas or Arizona right now. You're the Undersecretary, and I've not heard one thing you say today that you took any responsibility for what happened.
Senator, since I have been Assistant Secretary for Homeland Defense and Hemispheric Affairs, the Secretary of Defense has authorized 2,500 National Guard personnel year over year in support of DHS at the southwest border. He has also authorized 1,500 active duty personnel
Go through the
as
numbers.
a surge layer.
Nothing happened. I mean, like, I'm a business guy. If in business, if it didn't work, you change something. The numbers are not the numbers aren't going down. You're responsible for this. You are the Undersecretary, and you're responsible, and nothing got better.
Senator, it's the responsibility of the Department of Homeland Security for border security.
Okay, so what's your responsibility? Did you have none?
I receive requests from the Department of Homeland Security on how they need the Department of Defense to support them, and I provide options to the Secretary of Defense on pathways that are legal, that are appropriate per posse comitatus for our forces, and do not negatively impact training and readiness.
But you never told Mayorkas, you never told anybody else that they weren't doing their job.
No, Senator.
Why not? I mean, you look at the numbers just like we do. You got a family. You care about your family.
I do very much.
Yeah. I mean, so why wouldn't you say something?
Senator, I have attended many meetings internal to the department in the interagency focused on what is happening at the southwest border. I have routinely visited there. In fact, just 2 weeks ago, was down in San Diego, where unfortunately we see a number of special interest migrants coming through the border. I have taken this incredibly seriously in my role. There are limits to what I can do per statute from the Department of
But
Defense
you
on
didn't
border
even,
security.
you didn't say anything. I mean, you said you didn't, you never said, this is not working.
Senator, it is not within my purview to make changes to our overall border security policy. That falls to the Department of Homeland Security.
So Undersecretary of Homeland Defense, right?
Assistant Secretary of Homeland Defense and Hemispheric Affairs.
I mean, it's just, look at the numbers. Look at the criminals, the terrorists, the drugs, and then like, do you feel a responsibility to give us information? And then it took forever to even get information on what you were selling off.
Senator,
Didn't that bother you?
If I may on that point, it does bother me because I take my responsibilities as a Senate confirmed official very seriously. I am disappointed that we have not met the expectations clearly of this body or of Congress. We are a learning organization at the Department of Defense, and you have my commitment going forward in this role and if confirmed as Undersecretary of the Air Force to do better, to provide timely and accurate information when Congress requests it.
Thanks.
Thank you, Senator Scott. Senator Manchin, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for your service and willing to continue to serve. Dr. Schmidt, this is for you. Directly, you oversee the operational testing of the next generation of weapons. And the war in Ukraine, now the conflict in Israel, the United States, we've transferred a significant amount of our personal munition stockpile to Ukraine to sustain the forces. And, of course, Israel wants our assistance also. I'm just asking, do you believe that leaves us in an untenable position where we might be stockpiling short ourselves for our national defense?
So, Senator, my understanding in the role of Director of Operational Test and Evaluation, I'd be in the position to assess any systems that we may provide to our allies and our coalition partners. I'm not sure if it would fall within my purview to deal with stockpile issues, but clearly our stockpile and making sure that those capabilities are effective and lethal are very important as well. So I would make sure to follow
maybe
that.
this would be a little bit better, Doctor. In recent war games, you've probably seen the outcome of recent war games that we have, showing that basically we only have an 8-day supply if China, if we engaged.
That's correct.
Is that concerning?
Very concerning indeed, yes. Yes, Senator.
Can you produce more?
I'm sorry?
Can you produce more? Are we capable of producing more?
I'm sure, Senator, we would be capable of producing more, and my position, if confirmed, would be to make sure that whatever we produce is going to be survivable and lethal when used in combat.
Okay. Ms. Dalton, I'd like to also stay with the topic of current stocks of weapons to support allies, or replace them as rapidly as we can with our new next generation systems we're needing for our own stockpiles. Two perfect examples are the Army Tactical Missile Systems, which is the ATACMS, and the dual-purpose improved conventional munitions, which is the DPICMS. Both are due for either replacement or disposal, but it took so long for them to basically be put in to use in Ukraine. Can you explain that, or why it took so long to transfer that in?
Senator, thank you for highlighting the critical need for rejuvenating our approach to our munition stockpiles, given the multiple crises in which our allies and partners are engaged in around the world, and what that means for us going forward. I believe there's a lot of lessons learned that.
No, I'm saying your input right now. If we're going to get rid of, I'll use the PICMs. We have the ATACMs. They're like 1.2 million if we had stockpile, we were going to get rid of them. Took us a long time to get those back into where we agreed to send X amount to Ukraine, who needs them desperately. That type of decisions, knowing what we are going to deplete in a stockpile, we're not using them, or never going to use them, rather than disposing of them, giving them to our allies who need them desperately. That's the concern. I'll give you another one. The aging unmanned aircraft like the MQ-9, the Reaper, they could be used as disposable assets to target ground ship-based Russian anti-aircraft equipment, which would allow manned Ukrainian aircraft a fighting chance. However, the request hasn't been taken seriously by the department. Has it been brought to your attention?
It has not.
Could you raise that to that level? The Reaper, as we know it, has a tremendous platform to deliver a lot of the weapons that we have available that we're not going to use, and it would help them tremendously within this. And for some reason, I've been bringing to people's attention, can't get it up to where it's a concern.
Senator, I'd be happy to look into
We'll
it.
give you more of that too and your people.
Thank you.
And to Dr. Ericson, I would say this. I've been bringing civilian and military leadership to West Virginia throughout my entire Senate career to highlight our academic programs, our workforce, and DOD-owned Allegheny Ballistics Laboratory. Unfortunately, the department continues to spend an awful lot of taxpayers' money and going into high-cost living areas. Ours is not a high-cost living area. And if you don't, just ask the FBI. They put their whole outfit in Clarksburg, West Virginia, and it's been the best return on investment they've ever made. So I'm asking, would you come to visit West Virginia and try to bring some of those resources to a quality of life they would enjoy and a low cost of living, which I think the department would enjoy spending less money on?
Senator Manchin, thank you for your time and getting to know you. As I mentioned during our meeting, I am committed to West Virginia. I have a mini chapter from the NSBE Junior National Society of Black Engineers that partner with me. And so I'm committed to your region. I definitely would look forward to coming to view more of the capabilities you have.
We have a lot of success stories there, and I think it'd be worthwhile to take a visit to show what's being produced right now with some of these sophisticated systems that we do at the Ballistic Lab. It's really unbelievable. But also the FBI operations, I think you'd enjoy that too.
I appreciate that.
Thank you all. Appreciate it very much. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Manchin, and thank you, Senator Kramer, for your patience. You're recognized.
My patience results in my learning a lot more, Mr. Chairman, and it's been fascinating. So thank you all. Quickly, there's not one damn thing that anybody prepared for me that I'm ready to talk about because so many other things have come up that I want to talk about. And I don't have time to get a lot of answers, but I do want to mention to Dr. Ericson and Dr. Schmidt, I want to put a finer point on the discussion you had with a couple of my colleagues, and especially Senator King, regarding more appropriate countermeasures to these drones that are coming at our military men and women. The finer point is last night I went over to Walter Reed, and I met with the family of a North Dakota soldier. It was with Chief Warrant Officer Garrett Illerbrun is his name. His parents were there. His wife Lorna, who's also an Army aviator. He was injured on Christmas Day in Herbal. I think it was attack number 115 or something like that finally got a few of our guys, and he's recovering over in Walter Reed. And the one thing Lorna told me that I could say, she said, please check into why there's not a better countermeasure. Now, this is a hero herself, married to a hero with a 7-year-old little boy. And they're thinking, where is our government when 115 times the small drones come after us and one gets through, and now they're dealing with this. So I'm just illustrating that point for Chief Warrant Officer Illerbrun and his family and all of the people that he represents. We've got to do better than firing missiles at him. Secretary Dalton, I had several things on ISR and other things I wanted to visit with you about. We might have to get back together, frankly, and I appreciated your visiting with me before. But your response regarding the spy balloon to Senator Rounds causes me to just want to drill down a little bit more. You clearly were in the value chain of advisors. When did you first learn about the spy balloon, and what was your initial advice to Secretary Austin?
Senator, Secretary Austin first learned of the PRC spy balloon on January 27th, and I learned about it the same day.
What was your initial
My
counsel?
initial advice was that we absolutely needed to understand what capabilities were on the PRC high-altitude balloon. NORAD, Northcom was tracking it and characterizing it, but we needed to get to the bottom of what it was doing, what its intentions were.
So here's the bigger question, given your role. Why was there never an internal review? Why didn't you initiate an internal review of all the policies, the processes, the siloing of the various, the intelligence agencies and NORAD and DOD and all of that? In the absence of that, we did it. This committee put in the NDAA a review. Did it ever occur to you, gee, this is something maybe we should dig into a little bit and see where our failings are?
Senator, in fact, we have incorporated that in the development of our Homeland Defense Policy Guidance over the last year. It was signed by Secretary Austin in December. It has benefited from the lessons learned from the PRC HAB experience, and there are ample lessons to be gleaned from that in terms of what we need to do for our air and cruise missile defense of the homeland, in terms of NORAD modernization, and a number of other elements that I could discuss in a classified environment.
But my point isn't that you didn't benefit tremendously from the review that was initiated by this committee and put into law. Why wasn't that instinctive to do that? And in answering that, as I go into my final minute, I would add to that, now that you've had the review, now that you've seen the review, now that you've thought about this and been challenged, what would you do differently if you knew on that date, December 27th, what you know now? What mistakes were made that you made, perhaps, in your counsel to the Secretary that you would improve on?
Senator,
It's okay to have been wrong then, you know. The correction is what we're looking for.
Thank you, and we are all human.
Right.
But I think the benefit of having the investments to come in NORAD modernization would allow us to better characterize these types of threats sooner, and then to be able to develop options for policymakers and certainly for the Secretary and the President. The other big lesson learned for me is that as soon as we have threats that are actionable, policy decisions before they are made public, or any other DoD activities that we owe oversight answers to Congress, that we need to provide that in a timely fashion. Again, I understand that we have fallen short based on what I have heard from members today, and we will incorporate that into our responses going forward.
Well, that's a common theme throughout all of the services, throughout the entirety of my existence here, for sure, is not getting back to us in a timely manner. But my point was more about the crisis itself. Would you do anything differently now?
Senator, I think that we as a community could have had better national level integration at the local level. What I saw in the early days of the PRC HAB was that we were very well wired for responding to hurricanes, to wildfires, and that is the day-to-day existence for defense supportive civil authorities. But it hadn't been since World War II that we had an incursion over U.S. territory from a foreign adversary. And so, getting that national to federal, state, and local integration happened. But I think in real time, we could have been more expeditious about it, and we will do so going forward.
Sure. Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Kramer. Senator Gillibrand, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Dalton, congratulations on your nomination, and thank you for your service to the department thus far, including your engagement on the support for the anomalous health incident reviews. As DoD's lead for the AHI cross-functional team, can you describe those efforts for the committee and where you see them going in the future?
Senator, thank you so much for your support for the AHI CFT so that we can ensure that we're providing the best possible support to DoD personnel and other U.S. government personnel that have reported such incidents. There have been 3 lines of effort that we have been pursuing through the cross-functional team. First and foremost is taking care of our people, ensuring that they have the medical and holistic support to navigate through their physiological or mental health effects. The second is one that we've been pursuing quite robustly with Congress's support, and thank you for that, is research into the types of technologies that might be causing these types of physiological effects. That is happening across multiple arms of the DoD research enterprise, to include the service laboratories, to include DARPA and NSA. And then the third line of effort has been on adaptation. If this is to be a feature of the operational environment going forward, how does the Joint Force need to adapt to those realities? And what can we be building in terms of force protection, in terms of other measures to ensure that they can operate through that type of disruption?
Thank you. We continue to hear warnings about the ability of the PRC to target our critical infrastructure. Not only does this infrastructure provide critical services to Americans across the country, but things like electricity, water, ports. are also necessary to mobilize American military might in the event of a crisis. Given that most of the infrastructure belongs to non-federal entities, it is essential that the DoD work with those entities and other federal agencies to ensure the DoD is able to execute its mission whenever it is called to do so. And it is your responsibility as Assistant Secretary for Homeland Defense to oversee DoD's mission, assurance, and responsibilities. Understanding that this is an open venue, what do you see as the most significant challenges to DoD's work in this space? How would you characterize your relationship with sector risk management agencies? Are they providing the cooperation you need to ensure DoD interests are protected? What is your assessment of the work of the Critical Infrastructure Defense Analysis Center, and what is the relationship with non-DoD critical operators like?
Senator, first of all, I want to thank you for your support of our efforts on defense critical infrastructure, the conversations we've had with you and your staff, and your advocacy for the resourcing that the department needs to be able to do the analysis through the CDAC, for example, but also looking to work across committees, because we cannot succeed in building the resiliency of our defense critical infrastructure and protecting those most critical nodes for our warfighting missions without the cooperation of other federal departments and agencies. So thank you so much for that cross-committee support too. In terms of what we have been focused on, it's really prioritizing where are the most critical defense critical infrastructure nodes for our warfighting missions, and how can we mobilize resourcing internal to the department for the areas that we own and control to address and develop risk mitigation and build resiliency for those nodes. And then looking outside the wire, how do we need to build partnerships? How do we need to declassify or reduce the classification of sensitive information to provide to the private sector, to state and local authorities, to other departments and agencies to help us do that risk mitigation. There is, of course, more that we could discuss in a classified venue. I am delighted that we did get the Homeland Defense policy guidance signed by Secretary Austin, because that will provide us with a real driver going forward to focus the department's efforts on DCI.
You speak to your relationship or outreach to the private sector?
Absolutely, Senator. So as the Sector Risk Management Agency for Defense Critical Infrastructure, we convene the Government Coordinating Council for the Defense Industrial Base. We also convene the GCC and Sector Coordinating Council meeting with Defense Industrial Base partners, bringing together both worlds. That has been an opportunity to share cybersecurity best practices, to share our prioritization framework, and identify next steps together.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Duckworth, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to our witnesses, and thank you all for appearing today. Ms. Dalton, we talked a little bit about aeromedical evacuation. Evacuating our wounded troops, like all other logistics functions, would prove difficult in the Indo-Pacific should a conflict arise. And a conflict in the region would force our military's flying ambulances to reckon with thousands of miles of open ocean. DoD would not have full-service health facilities within the Indo-Pacific region. The nearest would be Guam and then Hawaii. And there would be challenges transporting and cooling medical supplies in a contested environment. Successful and professional aeromedical evacuation saved thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of our troops' lives in Iraq and Afghanistan. I'm concerned that the vast distances within the Pacific would affect capacity for life-saving aeromedical evacuation in the region by basically making the golden hour impossible. If confirmed, Ms. Dalton, how would you prioritize the Air Force's investments in aeromedical evacuation capabilities in the Indo-Pacific? And what ideas do you have for expanding and extending the golden hour for service members wounded in potential conflict in that region?
Senator, thank you so much for meeting with me last week, and I enjoyed our conversation on this and other quite important topics. I think you highlight an area where, frankly, in the department overall, and I've seen this in my current role, we are not investing the right amount of attention, given, as you illustrated, how we have seen the strain on our medical corps and capability in wartime, and given the complexity of what we would find in the Indo-Pacific Indo-Pacific, we need to dig further into this. I have seen in my current role some of the scenarios in which we may be called upon in the homeland to defend the American population, to provide defense support of civil authorities, and to project power forward that may actually draw upon critical capability areas like medical. And we need to do more scenario-based work to understand what are those requirements across those different demand signals, and how are we going to source that. So I think that type of approach could be quite useful for other military departments, to include the Department of the Air Force, to take on board, to have a scenario-based approach to stress testing the capability and capacity shortfalls that may exist. And so if confirmed, I would look forward to taking that analytically based approach.
I also think I would urge you to consider involving our allies in those scenario-based approaches as well.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Prepare for the possibility of conflict in the Pacific will require the DoD to invest in critical infrastructure and installations within the region. So continuing this conversation, our adversaries could disrupt our sustainment operations in the region by damaging or destroying airfields, fuel storage, and maintenance facilities. It is critical that we recapitalize strategic assets and bases in the region to make them more resilient and ready for a contested environment, including making them more resilient to climate change. Ms. Dalton, how important is it for the Air Force to invest in your critical infrastructure and installations in the Indo-Pacific to prepare them for the effects of climate change, to improve their energy security, and also to harden them against kinetic strikes?
Senator, thank you. And this is an area where I believe, again, my current experience can be helpful in bringing a lens forward for the Department of the Air Force if confirmed. As you note, particularly in the Indo-Pacific, there are a number of stressors facing our critical infrastructure and our installations, whether it's operating through a contested environment, given the cyber and space challenges that we potentially see from the PRC, or the effects of extreme weather, storm surge, unprecedented storms and typhoons hitting key locations that have subverted our ability to conduct exercises. We need to take a holistic view at what that security environment means for our installations, and ensure that we're building in resiliency to our critical infrastructure going forward. That is then compounded by the great distances that we have to field and project power in a contest with the PRC. And so looking for energy efficient, renewable energy sources that could be potentially pre-positioned in certain locations as part of our logistics chain. I think these are all different avenues that we need to explore. And I would certainly look forward to doing that if confirmed.
Thank you. You're back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Duckworth. Senator Sullivan is trying to make his way here, and we're going to allow him a few minutes to do that, but we have a vote on. So at some point, I'll have to close the hearing. But let me ask a question. Dr. Schmidt, we're learning quite a bit from the Ukrainian conflict, where they're improvising, using techniques and creativity. I assume we'll start doing the same things. And how will you help expedite that by testing or by validating the credibility of these spontaneous ad hoc developments?
Chairman Reed, one of the most valuable things we have at our disposal in the operational test and evaluation field is data and access to data. What we're getting from conflicts around the world, this includes the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aden, from Ukraine, and so on, is tremendous amount of data about how systems, our adversary systems, our allies' systems are behaving. And taking that data and being able to analyze it and make sense of it and then turn it into actionable courses to make our systems more effective, suitable, survivable, and when necessary, lethal is critically important. So I think if confirmed to this role, making sure we have the right investments in technologies and training for the workforce to be able to make sense of that data would be crucially important. And Ukraine is just one place where that would be valuable.
In a related issue, we're moving into digital testing techniques, which at least conceptually, could replace the physical testing of systems, platforms, et cetera. What is your sense of our position now and our progress forward?
Senator, this is a big passion of mine, modeling, simulation, digital technologies. We clearly have made a lot of progress in this space. There's a lot that remains to be done. One of the great things that we get with synthetic environments is the ability to test with threat densities that are next to impossible to achieve outside of actual conflict. And it also provides us with a way of being able to test our systems without subjecting the servicemen and women to actual harm during the test. Having said that, live fire testing is crucially important in order to be able to give the service people confidence systems actually work. So I would be in favor of continuing to invest in live testing to get the information and then make sure we feed it back effectively into our models.
No, I think you're exactly right. You'd like to know it shoots and moves before you get in it, from my experience.
Absolutely, Senator, yes.
And then at this point, let me recognize Senator Sullivan, and because of the vote pending, Dan, we'll try to hold it to 5 minutes.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for holding the hearing open. I want to focus primarily on Ms. Dalton, your position. And, you know, the state of Alaska, my state, plays a really, really critical role in a whole host of areas in terms of our military. I like to say we constitute 3 pillars of America's military might. We are the cornerstone of missile defense, so all the ground-based missile interceptors that protect the whole country are in Alaska. All the radar systems that protect the whole country are in Alaska. We're the hub of air combat power. For the Arctic and the Indo-Pacific, you probably know we have over 100 fifth-generation fighters based in Alaska. There's no place on the planet Earth that has 100 combat-coded fifth-gen fighters, but my state does. And then we are a platform for very well-trained expeditionary forces. Can get anywhere in the world, Northern Hemisphere, within 7 to 8 hours because of our strategic airlift. The Army redesignated the 11th Airborne Division in Alaska, Arctic Tough Airborne Division, so now the U.S. Army has 2 airborne divisions, Mr. Chairman, 82nd and the 11th. Good competition between our great Army airborne divisions. But the one thing I wanted to, so that's very important. I think everybody recognizes that. We're also becoming the kind of logistical hub for Arctic operations with the building of a strategic port in Nome and icebreakers being built, home stationed in my state. But the big issue I want to talk to you about are gaps in terms of domain awareness with regard to defense of the country. Anything that's going to attack the United States, Chicago, New York City, Miami, it doesn't matter, is going to come over and through Alaska. We know that. That's just physics. And in terms of emerging threats like hypersonics, unmanned aerial systems, advanced ballistic and cruise missiles, and we saw even slow-moving Chinese spy balloons, they're all going to come over Alaska first. Of course, I don't want them to hit my state, but I don't want them to hit my country either. So in terms of gaps in our capability to counter these...
Excuse me, Senator Sullivan, may I interrupt?
Yeah.
I have a call with the CENTCOM commander. I would now, at the conclusion of your testimony, conclude the hearing.
Okay, sounds good, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
And thank you all witnesses for your excellent testimony.
So I guess my main question is, how do we upgrade our domain awareness and ability to defend our nation through what we currently don't have in Alaska, which, as you know, is a big gap. I mean, we don't talk about it, but right now hypersonics is something we're not being able to defend against. But a lot of that's going to take place in my state, as you know. Or A, do you agree with me? Hopefully you do. But B, what are we doing to close those gaps? And those are really important because the Air Force is going to play the critical role.
Senator, thank you so much for raising this vital capability gap, frankly, that I believe we have right now. This has been an area of focus that Commander Northcom and I have been digging into with regards to NORAD modernization, looking at how we can improve all domain situational awareness, how we can strengthen command and control, how can we invest in capabilities to deter aggression and be ready to fight and win the nation's wars, how can we be investing in research, development, testing, and evaluation. I know colleagues here at the table will also have a role to play if confirmed. We've developed a joint plan with the Canadians to help drive forward the combined or joint approach that we are taking with them when it comes to NORAD modernization. But frankly, Senator, far more needs to be done. And so I'm grateful for the support of Congress for the over-the-horizon radars. That investment, along with other capabilities, are going to be quite important for NORAD modernization, as well as the reauthorization of the Section 130I authority for counter-UAS. And just as a note, Senator, I had an opportunity to travel to Alaska last March and was really struck by the tremendous capability as you walked through. Had an opportunity to visit Eielson and see the considerable power projection capability of the F-35s, Fort Greely for missile defense, and up to Clear Space Force Base for the LRDR. And, Billy Mitchell's quote, I think, carries on in terms of he who holds Alaska holds the world. I was really struck to see a map, it's unclassified, that you can reach just about every strategic location in the world from Alaska within 5 to 10 hours. And so you have a commitment, certainly in my Homeland Defense role, and have confirmed as Undersecretary of the Air Force to work with you on these priorities.
Great, thank you. You mentioned Eielson, Clear, Fort Greely. It's about 40 below in all those places right now, so it's tough duty too, right? So we need to support our military up there. I'm going to keep my word here to the chairman and gavel out here in a couple seconds. I do want to just get your commitment. When the Northcom commander was here, he made a commitment during his confirmation hearing. When you talk about NORAD modernization, we have great allies in terms of Canada. The one thing, though, that Canada, to be perfectly blunt, and I asked them in a hearing just like this, has been not been good on is actually defense spending, right? And I got the commitment from the incoming Northcom commander when he meets with his Canadian counterparts and in your NORAD role. I'd like you to make the same commitment to talk to the Canadians and say, hey, come on, it's a dangerous world, right? The United States can't be pulling the weight for everybody. Canada spent about 1.2% of GDP on defense. They're supposed to be spending 2% minimum as a NATO member. They consistently don't hit that. Their prime minister has indicated he has no plans to hit that. It's really pathetic. And in terms of North American defense, they often just rely on us. They don't do anything on missile defense. They rely on us. And I think hopefully, like the Northcom commander, you'll commit to us, and this is a bipartisan issue, by the way. I was over at the NATO summit with 3 Republican senators, 3 Democrat senators. We had all the leaders who aren't hitting their 2% commitments like, hey, come on, joke's over. It's a really dangerous world, folks. We got global commitments, the United States does, but the Canadians need to step up, and certainly in NORAD modernization. So if confirmed in those discussions, can you commit, like the Northcom commander did, to have a frank discussion with the Canadians that it's, meet your obligation? It's only been 10 years at least since all the NATO leaders have said we're going to hit the 2% GDP. Prime Minister Trudeau thinks that was a suggestion, not a commitment, and it looks like Canada's not even close, and it's not good.
Yes, Senator, I commit to that.
Great. Okay, on behalf of the chairman, I want to thank all the witnesses and their families and supporters here. And for now, this meeting is adjourned.